Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. My name is Dalia, and I work as a community manager here at Kong, and I'm very happy to welcome all of you to our August user call. So today we have as a topic improving day-2 operations with Kong Gateway. We have Michael and Veena with us who will be presenting. I will let them introduce themselves. Let's take all of the questions at the end. You will see a Q&A function at the bottom where you can input all of your questions. Please put them there instead of in the chat because it's easier to keep track in the Q&A function. So before we kick it off with the presentation, I want to make all of you aware that next to API Summit this year, which is happening 27-28th of September, we're also doing our annual hackathon. So I think most of you should be familiar with us if you have been following us for some time now, but this is our third annual virtual hackathon that we do along API Summit. So this year, it's actually pretty interesting because the hackathon will be focusing on API innovation using artificial intelligence. We welcome a maximum of team of 4. There will be a lot of cool prizes, so I encourage you all to subscribe and to stay updated. The submissions are opening August 28th and will run for a month. We will announce the winners on the last day or on the second day of API Summit. So subscribe, stay up to date, and I encourage you all to participate because the awards are very cool. I will also input the link here in the chat so you can subscribe for updates. But yeah, it will be cool to have all of you participate and build cool stuff with us. And with that, I would like to pass it along to Veena. Go ahead. Let me stop sharing.
Let me share my screen. All looking good. Right. Good morning, everyone. Good evening. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever you're joining from. Thank you for joining today. My name is Veena Rajaratna. I am a product manager on the Gateway team. I recently joined Kong. I've been here less than 2 months. I come from Nginx. I was building similar API management, API gateway solutions. I'm really impressed with Kong and what has been achieved here with regards to API gateway and API management, and excited to be here today. I'm here to talk about the 3.4 release today. So just before we kick off, I want to take an extra minute just to reiterate another important milestone, which is Kong Gateway 3.4 is an LTS release on version 3.x series. If you recall, Kong had a on the 2.x series, they had an LTS release. I believe the build was 2.8. And if you have not really transitioned, or if you're considering transition from the 2.x series, then 3.4 is the right version to transition to. So it will have long-term support until August 2026. So if you need more information to make that informed decision, I believe you can listen to the previous user calls that may have more details on the architectural improvements in 3.x over the 2.x series. All right, let's jump into the 3.4 highlights. As this call suggests, right, this release was focused mainly on improving this operational efficiency, right? So making it easier for operations day 2 and beyond. So at a thematic level, categorized it into 3 buckets, which is one is simplifying API management, enhancing the reliability. That's the first category. Second, there are improvements and enhancements addressing the security and compliance needs. And the third one is boosting that developer productivity and efficiency. So this is at a high level. We look at the details on each of these items in the later slides, but wanted to give you, the thematically what was addressed and what's the key highlights of 3.4. So in the first category of simplifying the API management, we introduce again the 3.4 is an LTS, so it's a good build to be migrating to if you're considering migrations from 2.x series. There is deck-based migration support, so that's again simplifying the operations. And we introduced a feature called consumer groups in the 3.3 release of Kong Gateway. And what what 3.4 addresses is that it extended the consumer groups to other plugins in 3.4. So we'll get into the details in the slides below. In the security and the compliance category, we improved the secrets management, right? So there's support for rotating the secrets. There is improvement to the IP restriction plugin. You can now restrict traffic based on the TCP traffic. So if you have TCP applications, you can restrict traffic based on IP addresses or a block of IP addresses. And the Kafka log plugin also had some improvements to the logging capabilities. And in the last category, the enhancing the productivity for developers, very excited to announce the WASM support in gateways. So this is a much awaited feature wherein you can create WASM filters as opposed to Lua filters and create custom filters for running in the gateway. So we'll talk about it in detail later on. So that's the key highlights. In the first category, that simplifying the API management and reliability. So if you recall, consumer groups was introduced for a reason, right? So Kong Gateway treats consumers as first-class entity, right? So you could create plugins to execute on consumers. So what this ended up doing was that at the customer's sites, we had a lot of plugins created, and if not hundreds, thousands of plugins because of this per consumer approach. What this led to was the performance of the gateway, right? So it has to constantly rebuild that execution logic for the plugins, manage the routing tables and routing rules. So the performance kind of took a hit when, as the number of this per consumer plugins exceeded. So consumer groups was introduced to address this issue. The idea is you can logically group consumers into a group. For example, let's say you have 3 tiers, gold, silver, bronze, and you want to rate limit according to the tiers, 3 tiers. So you could group those consumers into these 3 different groups and apply the rate limit plugin on a groups, right? So that you only have to manage 3 groups, not like hundreds of plugins. So you're managing so the number of plugins comes down. It makes the gateway perform better, and there's drastically reduces the overhead, operational overhead on managing n number of plugins. So in this release, the consumer group support has been extended to 4 more plugins, 2 categories, but both basic and advanced plugins of request transformer category and the response transformer. So there's additional support in these plugins now to support consumer groups. So really, this is focused on mitigating the risk associated. It's harder to propagate changes if you had thousands of plugins, right? So now you have a fewer number of plugins, and change management becomes easier. So decreasing that operational overhead as well. So that's one of the key features. And the second one is the one that I talked about earlier, which is a long-term support. So 3.4 is the LTS version. It will have support and security upgrades and patches for up until August of 2026. So that really makes it enterprise grade. And the enterprises are looking for LTS builds. Excuse me. Right. In the second category, the security and compliance bucket. So we introduced secrets rotation, right? So secrets management in Kong was introduced some time back. I don't know very well, but what it does is it integrates with backends like Vault, HashiCorp Vault, or AWS Secrets Manager, GCP Secrets Manager, to really centralize your secrets management, right? So organizations have, mandates today that they have to adhere to, securely store the secrets and adhere to policies and have lifecycle policies around these secrets, how often the secrets are rotated, what's the duration that the secret is valid for, things like that, right? So to really adhere to that enterprise standard, we need to support secrets rotation. So secrets can be rotated periodically, or if, on demand, if the security team wants to do that, right, on demand due to a breach or something. So the 3.4 version, starting with the 3.4 version of Kong, secrets can be rotated periodically, either by setting a TTL, either to support these lifecycle policies that various organizations may have. You want to set the TTL on a per secret basis, or at a high level, such as a vault level. So Kong supports both methods. You can set a TTL on a secret or set it at a vault level and have those secrets rotated and adhere to those enterprise policies. Or it can be rotated on demand as well, or on failures, right? So this really elevates that secrets lifecycle management, makes that enterprise ready and enterprise grade feature for organizations. In the same category of security and compliance, the IP rules, IP restriction plugin was enhanced to support blocking on the TCP traffic as well. So if you have database servers or media servers or any other TCP-based applications, now the IP restriction plugin can block the TCP traffic as well, right? So access can be allowed or denied based on an IP address or a list of IP addresses. And this feature really closes the gap that existed because the IP restriction already supported HTTP, blocking the HTTP traffic or the gRPC traffic, and it was missing the TCP. So this really closes that gap. And the quick benefit of this IP restriction is you can quickly block malicious IP addresses at the gateway. So that's really elevating that security aspect as well. And in the last category of boosting the developer productivity, this is the much awaited feature from Kong Gateways. So the support for WASM in the gateways, that's going beta in 3.4. So as you may already be familiar with WASM, so it really helps, or you can really extend the gateway capabilities using filters, right? So you might have come across a situation where you need to write custom logic, though out of the box plugins may not be sufficient, and you need to address some proprietary logic that you have to write a filter for. Previously, that was the Lua filters. There was a learning curve, so we did not really meet the customers where they were. So what this WASM support brings is the ability to write filters in the language of your choice, right? So you can write filters in Rust and Go. We start with Rust and Go. Those two are the two verified languages that we support, and more would come in as the SDKs become available. And the other advantage is you can build this filter ecosystem, right? Or the plugin ecosystem. You write it once, and you may reuse this filter in other gateways or mesh envoy proxies. You're not having to write it again and again. So there's that reusability aspect as well with the filters, right? So a lot of organizations use multiple vendors, and you want to manage, you want to build that ecosystem, extension ecosystem that can work across those. The third advantage of WASM again is, besides making it powerful and performant plugins, you can also build custom logic by chaining the filters, right? So your filters can be purpose built and small, but to achieve some custom logic, you can chain filters, and so the filter runs in some logical order. So that is an improvement over the Lua filters, Lua plugins. And really this boosts the developer productivity. They're writing filters in the language that they're familiar with. And in 3.4, the WASM 3.4 ships with the WASM module, right? So all batteries included, There is no assembly, there's no dependencies. You can use it right out of the box once you have your development environment set up to build those filters. And if you decide it's not for you, this doesn't change anything. It's an option, right? So it's not on by default, so it doesn't impact any the gateway performance. Those are the updates in the 3.4 that I had. Michael, over to you.
Thank you. If you stop sharing, I can take over. All right, it's my turn to take the stage. Thank you for that informative update, Veena. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm Michael, and I'm here to talk to you about Kong Ingress Controller 2.11. We had three main themes for the release. The primary one was robustness. We also took a look at some of the Kong Gateway features that Veena just spoke about and made sure that you can use them in the Kubernetes world. And then finally, we continue to invest in the Kubernetes Gateway API. The theme of this call is about Day-2 operations, and that's what Kik 2.11 really focuses on. Installing Kik is easy. Helm install Kong/Ingress, but actually keeping it running once you've installed and configured all your routes is slightly harder. Now, the first thing I want to cover are some new Prometheus metrics that we've added. In Kik 2.9 and 2.10, we added Kubernetes events. So if you do kube-control get events, then there's a Kong configuration apply failed event that will tell you what is wrong when your Kong configuration is invalid. It could be an invalid regular expression in a route. It could be the same plugin attached to a service multiple times. Those events will tell you exactly what went wrong. But as we started using those in production, we realized that we actually needed to be alerted when something was wrong so that we could go and inspect the events. So we upgraded our Prometheus metrics to show when the last successful configuration push time was. So if that goes above a certain threshold that you define, you can get alerted because something's wrong. We can't push new configs anymore. We've also got a metric for how many broken resources there are. So how many Kubernetes resources we couldn't translate into a Kong configuration object. So take a look at these three Prometheus metrics and configure some new alerts so that you can be notified when your Kong configuration is broken. Now, Kik's 2.11's standout feature, in my opinion, is last known good configuration, which allows you to scale out your data planes, even if you have a broken configuration on your Kubernetes API server. So we're just talking about how you can be alerted when there is a broken config. Well, in Kik 2.10 and before, if there was a broken config and your pods restarted or you scaled out, those new pods would not receive a config. In Kik 2.11, with last known good config, those data planes will get the last known good config. Now, if you have a broken configuration on your Kubernetes API server, that's a strange sentence, but it does happen more than you think. Because imagine this. Engineering Team X manages the product catalog service, and they've applied a rate limiting plugin to the service. Now, Team Y looks after partners, and they want to give that partner a higher rate limit. So they attach a rate limit plugin against the service and the partner's consumer group. Now, this will work fine, except for the fact that Team Y that manages partners, they forgot to associate the plugin with the consumer group. And now we have two rate limiting plugins targeting the same service, and you have a broken configuration on your Kubernetes API server until Team Y realizes and fixes its configuration to target a service and a consumer. As I said, in previous versions of Kik, new pods wouldn't be able to proxy traffic as Kik would send them invalid configs. But as of Kik 2.11, last known good configuration ensures that new pods get a valid config as soon as they start up. This is a nice quality of life change. We've added support for the status ready endpoint, which is a reasonably new Kong gateway endpoint. So you may have noticed in the past that when a pod spins up, its health check returns 200 before a configuration has been provided by Kik. In that case, the proxy returns a 404 because there are no roots. And if you haven't seen this, don't worry. It is a rare occurrence, like the time between a pod coming online and passing health checks and receiving traffic. Passing health checks and receiving a config is in the milliseconds. So this is rare, but it still happens. So now we want to get rid of it for good. Using the new status ready endpoint, health checks only pass once a configuration has been received. That means that we can guarantee that a pod is ready to handle traffic before we put it into the pool of pods that can handle user requests. This is customizable. If you want to use the old status endpoint, the new status ready, or even a custom health check endpoint, you can configure that in our Helm chart. Talking about new gateway features, we've also got consumer group support in Kik 2.11. Veena spoke to you about them and why they've been added to Kong Gateway, talking about the configuration complexity and the size of parsing the config in the gateway. Now, consumer groups allow you to define a group of users and attach plugins to that group. It's a new COD, the Kong Consumer Group resource, and the Kong Consumer resource has a new field called Consumer Groups, which you use to reference the consumer group by name. Here, you can see that Bob is a consumer, and he belongs to Team Dev. We can then use that Team Dev consumer group to attach any plugins we need, request transformer, response transformer, any plugins the consumer group supports. Now, the advantage to this is when Team Dev has 100 consumers, 1,000 consumers, 10,000 consumers, you need to add or remove a plugin. Instead of going to all 10,000 of those consumers and patching them to remove the plugin annotation, all you have to do is patch that consumer group resource and all of the consumers will be updated instantly. Last but not least, we are now conformant with the Gateway API 0.7.1 HTTP conformance tests. If you've been to these calls before, you know that we're really big on the Kubernetes Gateway API. The Gateway API allows you to configure Kong using Kubernetes resources such as HTTP route, TCP route, and Kong play a pivotal role in driving that Kubernetes ecosystem forward. Shane, one of our colleagues, is actually the chair of the networking SIG and is driving a lot of this. So if you're interested in Kubernetes and making the ecosystem interoperable between gateways, we do encourage you to participate in the Kubernetes networking special interest group to try and make the Gateway API standards the best that it can be. So these 4 things should help you in your day 2 operations with Kong Gateway and Kong Ingress Controller, being able to configure consumer groups for management of plugin configs. The Gateway API is familiar. It's vendor agnostic, so that if you're used to configuring routes with one gateway, it will work with another. Status Ready is available in both the gateway and Kik. And last but not least, last known good configuration for when you do have a broken config but still need to proxy traffic. Hopefully all of these things will help keep your Kong gateways online and processing traffic 24/7. And with that, I think it's time to hand back to Dalia.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Veena. That was amazing. Let's see if we have any questions. I don't see anything in the Q&A. See Michael answered something in the chat. Let's give it a few minutes for people to ask any questions. Come on, everyone. Use this opportunity to ask Michael and Veena if there's anything else you want to know based on their presentation. There's one question from Andre.
Yes, that's right. So WASM support in both OSS and Enterprise editions. So the team plans to go GA with WASM soon. So any feedback is appreciated. They'll be looking forward to it. So yes, it's available in the OSS as well.
We obviously did too good a job explaining everything, Veena. No one has any questions.
I think you did. You both did. Cool. Well, no one has any questions. Yeah, I don't think so. Cool. Thanks everyone for attending. We hope to see you at our next events. Don't forget we have our API Summit at the end of September 27, 28. So make sure you attend. We have a ton of interesting sessions. So subscribe and it will be virtual. So we can't wait to see you there. And with that, I wish you good evening, good day, wherever you're based, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.